Hi folks, I'm Craig Taylor, and as always a huge thanks for joining me here on my YouTube channel, the Bushcraft Padawan. If you're a regular viewer, you'll know that I try and get out at least for one full day every month and have been doing that since the beginning of this year, 2018. It's the 14th of September, so let's get September's Bushcraft All Day started. You'll also know, if you're a regular viewer, that rather than just come out into the woods for a day and potter around aimlessly, just tinkering around, I always like to come out with a plan in mind, a list of things that I'd like to try and attempt for the first time, things that I'd like to practice, things that I'd like to refine, and once again September is no exception to that. Things I'd like to do today then in no particular order. I have a new steel striker that I bought with some birthday vouchers that I was given from my father-in-law, thank you John. So I've bought a steel striker, so I'd like to start a fire using that today, whether it's onto char cloth, char wood, some Daldinia concentrica cramp balls that I've got with me, whatever it's onto, I'd like to try and initiate a fire that way. I've yet to use my Mora Garberg to carve some feather sticks, create some feather sticks, so that's something that I want to do today. I also want to practice what we were taught on the Woodcrafter course with Paul Kirtley back in the spring of this year. Seems like a long time ago now. I want to try and create a tripod, a cooking tripod, but without using any lashings. I'm quite good at creating them with lashings, with cordage, but I want to actually try and create one that supports its own weight. If time allows, I'd like to create a pot hanger in exactly the same way without using any cordage. And I'd also, oh yeah, that was the other thing. For months now I've been trying to get out and to practice and refine using my brown bag water filter, because I kind of got it wrong at the end of last year, beginning of this year. Every time I come out it's too bone dry, so I'm going to a slightly different part of the woods today where there is usually some water, either standing water or some very slow moving stream type water. So I've come to that area of the woods today, and hopefully if I get all that cracked I'll be able to make myself a brew. Let's find out. Well, I don't want to jinx it, but we seem to be off to a good start to the day. The area that I've come to has had some felling operations taking place fairly recently, I guess, and as you may be able to see behind me, there has been a lot of wood felled, a lot of pine trees felled. So there are lots of very nice, straight, dead, so I'm not going to have to hack away anything that's green, straight pieces of wood. So in terms of building this, fingers crossed, I've not built it yet, but in terms of building this self-supporting, lashings-free cooking tripod, I look like I'm in a good place to try and start to harvest some materials for that. Let's find out. What I've done so far then is I've found 3 very straight pieces of pine, probably about wrist to forearm thickness, no thinner or thicker than that. But what I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out a way of getting the offshoots from these pieces of wood to interlock together to support one another, and also be able to support the cooking pot that's below. You'll notice that there are lots of straggly offshoots lower down. There's a heck of a lot, probably out of camera shot, of wood above this supporting locking position here. I'm not worried about that at the moment. My focus at the moment is, can I get these to support one another? If I can, if it's safe, if it's strong, if it's self-sustaining, then I'll spend the time trimming down the shoots on the edges and the excess wood at the top. But it's pointless doing that, it's a waste of time doing that if actually the framework won't lock together. So that's my focus at the moment. There, done and dusted. I've got it to a decent height. It's probably, the apex of it is probably about 6 foot, 6'2", because it's at my eye level. You'll see that I've got those branches interlocking at the top. I've cleaned off each of the 3 limbs, but I haven't cleaned them off completely. You may notice around sort of here and in other areas on the other limbs, I've left some little shoots sticking out there. I've done that for two reasons. One, it allows me to hang things off it, such as mugs, cooking pots, pans, but also I've seen an interesting video from Dave Canterbury where actually he used those as brackets. Let me come around and get into shot, actually. Let me show you what I mean. Oh, here we go. He kind of used them as shelf brackets, so he would secure a piece of wood from here to here on these pegs that are sort of sticking out. I think you can just about see them in shot. He'd secure a limb of wood there, and then he had a smoking rack. Then he had something that he could hang clothing on to allow it to dry out, or from rain or from sweat, things like that. So I've not tried to make this too flush. I've kept those little knobbles of wood there to help me should I wish to build upon this structure at any point. But that was very quick to do. It took longer than the lashing, or it felt like it took longer than the lashing, but this is the first time that I've ever on my own built one of these self-supporting structures, so there was a little bit of juggling and adjustment, but overall very impressed with it. I've impressed myself. It's easily done. I'm going to move on now. Somebody behind me. I'm going to move on now to creating this adjustable. What is it this morning that I just can't pronounce simple words? Adjustable pot hanger to hang off this tripod behind me. One of the things that I enjoy is the more I get into bushcrafting is coming out with a plan or a thought about how to do something. And then I think what bushcrafting allows you to do, or it's allowed me to do, is to see a different way of achieving it. So seeing a material or something with a certain property and think, you know what, that will be easier, quicker, faster than what I originally had in mind. 2 years ago, a year ago, 3 years ago, I'd have probably stuck with my original plan because that's what I'd set out to do and that's what I, in my head, knew would work. As I learn more, I'm learning along the way that I can shift and change that plan. And this is exactly what's just happened here. What I had been looking for was a branch, a fairly flexible branch, but a branch all the same. It would be a relatively straight branch, and at the bottom of it, if I turn my hand upside down, how am I going to do this? There'd have been something sticking up at that kind of angle. Oh God, I'm dislocating something here, like that, and I would hang my pot off here and I would move it up and down. That had been the plan. I've just walked over to find that, and I've found this length of honeysuckle here, and I'm thinking to myself, if I can cord this together, if I can tie this very long piece into a loop, what I've essentially got then is some cordage, and I can hook the end of this over here. I can hang my pot off the bottom of it where my hand is at the moment, and I've got an adjustable, to a degree, pot hanger. Yes, I can't lift the pot out of it because it's in a closed loop, but this is quick. I'm saying it's easy to do, I haven't done it yet. It seems like it would be easy to do, and I stumbled across this property, this material immediately, rather than having to look around for what my original plan had been. So I'm going to give this a go and see if this works. Let's see what I've done then. I took the honeysuckle, I looped it in half so that the two ends were together, and then about 3/4 of the way down I tied an overhand knot. Towards the top I've tied an overhand knot, and then each of these can act as a point of adjustment. So if I hang it over here like this, my pot would be hanging relatively close to the fire, it would be in the fire. If I were to hang it higher, it's slightly higher, and then even higher still. Clearly there's no weight on this honeysuckle at the moment, it's just flapping around in the air, but if there were a cooking pot, a metal water bottle, a billy can, something like that, it would pull it much closer down. But I'm quite happy with that. I think, to be perfectly honest, honeysuckle isn't a material that I've ever used for this type of thing. It's always been something that I've used for fire starting. So I think the first time I was to use this, I'd probably use it in a safe situation, probably with a small amount of water in there or something that wasn't critical. I definitely wouldn't be hanging a Dutch oven off this the first time I used it, if indeed ever. But for the sake of a quick, easy, adjustable pot hanger that was to hand, it was just a few meters out of camera shot over there, I found it, I'm quite happy with that. And again, it's getting hands-on, practicing and using a different material. And the fact that there's some honeysuckle close by won't be wasted later on in this video, will it? As you've just seen behind me and around me, there's a little bit of a close-up of some of the forestry work that's been taking place here. There's lots of downed wood on the ground. I want to avoid that for the feather sticks. What I want to do is go just behind me here and just off to the side of me here, where there are some very vertical dead standing pine, and there's also some pine that's dropped slightly. It's on something of an angle, so not my go-to, if you like. For the feather sticks, I'd rather have something that's upright, more chance of it being bone dry, but there is lots around me. Now, as I'm looking at these lengths of wood, these pieces of downed wood, some pieces are screaming out at me. You know, they're beautifully, or they appear beautifully straight. There's some big sections that don't appear to have any knots in them, so it's kind of screaming out at me, that would be good for feather stick, that would be good for feather sticking. I'm mindful though that when I came to, and it was this area of the woods to be honest, but just a few hundred metres that way, I came here at the beginning of the year solely intending, it was a video where I was looking to do withers and have a fire under a tarp and do feather sticks. And the feather sticks just went horribly wrong, they were terrible. There was just, the inside of them was just so punky and rotten that it just didn't work. As I was scraping the knife down, the wood was just disintegrating in front of me. So I'm mindful that whilst it looks great from the outside, it may be pretty poor inside. However, the previous example I'm talking about, I was in something of a slightly different area. There hadn't been as much forestry work. I really had to look for some dead standing. I was in a very healthy stand of pines. I had to look for the dead standing. Here, the dead standing's jumping out at me, so I can probably be a little bit more selective about which piece I use, rather than having to put all my eggs in one basket like I did a few months ago, well, quite a few months ago at the beginning of the year. So fingers crossed that I can find a good dead standing piece, nice and straight, no knots, quite a length between the knots so I can get nice curls on them, and that it's not too punky or rotten inside. Keep your fingers crossed for me. Let's see how we get on. So that was interesting. I took that tree down, as you've just seen, right at the base, and as soon as I started cutting, I thought, oh no, first time. It went through like a knife like butter. There was just sawdust pouring out. It was like cutting through flour. There was no resistance at all. The bottom of it was all punky, and I thought, oh, terrible. So I thought to myself, you know what, I'm actually going to work up from the bottom. So I went up probably like 10-15 feet, and I actually managed to secure these pieces here. There's one, there's two, there's three. Quite straight, as you can see. And I think most importantly, the actual wood itself at the ends seems quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Woody, as opposed to powdery. Yeah, the word escapes me, but it just seems more intact. That's the word. It seems more intact. So, fingers crossed, these won't disintegrate in front of my very eyes like they did the last time I tried feather sticks in this neck of the woods. So, I'm going to use probably my axe that I've brought with me to take these down into quarters at least. They won't split nicely into quarters. There'll be some that just peel off and some that crack, but I'm going to have a go at splitting them down into quarters, and then I'll start work on the feather sticks using my Mora Garberg for the first time. have a brown bag water filter. I have the intent. I have the desire. What I don't have is any water though. Just have a look at this. So this track here is normally underwater. You notice that there's a, right in the middle of the shot there, there's a log laid across it. You actually have to balance across. This area here is normally a runoff from, you may just be able to make it out there, but you can see this, the dry stream bed off into the distance, flows into here, this fills up, this overflows across the track, and you can just start to make out the stream bed in the distance there. Bone dry. What I'm going to do is follow it down as far as I can before I run out of woodland, and there is a pond slash small lake where it collects. I'm going to see if there's anything left in there, but it's not looking favourable at the moment. Let's see how I get on. Okay, so I take that back. There's a very good quantity of water in this pond here. I'm actually stood in, you probably can't make it out, but I'm actually stood in the stream bed that would flow in and fill this up. So where have I gone wrong in the past with this brown bag technique? Well, I read the instructions, half read the instructions, and it tells you to soak it before use, and I did that. I had it soaking in water for about a week at home in a bowl of water. I'd take it out, I'd wring it out, I'd get any air out, I'd submerge it again, and I did that day in, day out, changing the water for about a week. That was my interpretation of soak it before use. What it actually means is do that, but also soak it before every use. What I'd done in the past was I brought this out pre-soaked at home, I filled it with water, it drained out, it filtered, don't get me wrong, it worked, but it was really, really slow. What I should have done was I should have submerged it, soaked it, wrung it out, soaked it again, wrung it out, then filled it with water and allowed it to filter through, and apparently it would have been much quicker. So I'm going to do as I'm told this time. I'm going to do as the very clear instructions on it, there they are, tell you to do, and I'm going to soak it, submerge it, wring it out, do that again a couple of times, then fill it up, then take it back over to my area. I'm going to hang this off the tripod that I made earlier on, and I've pre-positioned my metal mug there to catch it so I don't waste any water. I also made sure that when I hung this that there wasn't too much of a gap between the bottom of it and the mug, and also that it wasn't, you know, traipsing along the floor. So I've picked a decent height for it on that tripod to allow it to filter through into the mug. So let me just reposition this camera so you can catch me falling into this pond, and let's get this wrung out. Let's do it properly. Ha! And those teachers at school said I wouldn't amount to anything. Just look at me now. So I've got the bag, there's the pond, let's get it submerged, let's get it soaked. Wringing it out, submerging again. I have to tell you, this stinks. But that's the whole purpose of it, isn't it? To take dirty, potentially undrinkable water, filter it, boil it, and then consume it. But Jesus, it stinks. Okay, so it's been submerged. I've wrung it out a couple of times. There we go, wrung it out again. Right then. Now to collect this water. Once I've collected this, I'm not going to stand on ceremony in front of the camera or anything like that. I'm just going to grab the camera and head back, because I only have a certain amount of time for this to run down to what would be considered a safe runoff level, and then any water that runs off after that, I'm actually wasting it. So I can afford to waste some water from this, but I don't want to stand on ceremony and waste too much. One of the things you need to consider with this is not just filling it up with how much you need or think you'll need. You actually need to fill it up to a specific point on the bag, which I'm about 3/4 of the way there, to allow A little more. There we go, that's top as there. So, as you can see, the water running off now, I'm okay with wasting that because that water is dirty, it's running off the outside of the bag. I'm happy to lose that water. What I don't want to lose is the point where it's run down to a safe runoff. Anything after that is wastage. So I'm going to get myself back to the camp area now. You'll notice the water is just dripping onto the ground. I'm happy with that because this water is still the dirty runoff. What I need to do is to wait until the water that's in here has run down to this stitch mark on the bag. Here there is a stitch mark across it, it's quite clear. It's still good, it's a couple of inches above that at the moment, so I need to wait for that to run off a lot more. Then I can put the mug underneath the water receptacle, the container, and then I can collect that water. So a little way to go just yet. Now, a friend of mine, Gemma, hello Gemma if you're watching, has asked me to make a video on collecting water in the wild. So this video is clearly a little more than that, but for Gemma's sake and anybody else that's interested, let me just explain what's happening right now. The water that went into this was potentially, well, it was dirty, God, it smelt dirty, but it was potentially contaminated. It very definitely was. There were leaves, twigs, bits of mud, bits of vegetation floating around here, and those were the things that I could see. Of course, there was probably a hell of a lot more that I couldn't see. So what this is doing, this is a coarse filter system, C-O-A-R-S-E, coarse filter system. This is filtering out, to put it bluntly, the big chunks of crap, the leaves, the twigs, the vegetation, the bits of mud, the big stuff. That's what this is filtering out. Of course, ingesting twigs and mud and leaves and things like that, at best, will just give you a, it will give you a stomach upset because your stomach's not used to digesting that. At worst, there could be something clinging onto that debris, some bacteria, some contaminants that could do you some real damage. So that's what this is partially filtering out. It's filtering out the big chunks of debris and anything that's stuck to them. It's not filtering everything out though. It's not making the water that's coming from this drinkable yet, but it's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. It's filtering out a lot of the stuff. Once this has dropped down to a safe level, I'll collect that water and I'll boil that water, and I'll boil it for a minimum of 2 minutes at a rolling boil. And by rolling boil, I mean when it is vigorously bubbling away, like your kettle does, just at the point where it switches itself off. That's a rolling boil. I'll boil that for 2 minutes. Those 2 minutes will allow any remaining bacteria and nastiness in there to have been killed off. They'll actually be killed off lower than 100 degrees C. They'll actually be killed off lower than boiling point. The problem with that is, how do you know what the temperature of the water is? How do you know whether it is 80 something degrees or whatever it is? You don't, do you? A visual indicator is the water boiling. So you're over boiling it if you like, but I'd rather do that than guess that looks about 80 degrees, therefore I think it's safe to drink. So that's why we stick to a rolling boil. It's a good visual indicator. And at that point then, I can then, he says, crossing his fingers, consume the water. I've done it many times and I'm still here, and there's nothing wrong with me, is there? Still got a full head of hair, so no wrinkles, no worry frowns or anything like that. So it's clearly doing me the world of good drinking pond water. But that's what's happening now. I'm coarse filtering out the big chunks of crap and anything that's stuck to those as well. But it doesn't do everything. That's where the boiling will come in. So Gemma, hopefully that's helped you out. Feel free, if you're ever in my neck of the woods, pop down to the woods and I'll boil you up some muddy water for a drink. You'll love it. And hopefully anybody else that was just watching the last few minutes has found that useful as well. Coarse filtration. The water level has now dropped about 1 inch or so below that stitch mark, so I'm going to put my mug underneath there. And just as a fail-safe, I've got a bandana here, I've got some material. I'm going to put that over the mug, just to stop any leaves, debris or dirt or anything like that blowing in. It'd be gut-wrenching, wouldn't it, that you spend all this time setting up a water filtration system, you filter the water, and then something drops straight into the filtered water that you've just filtered. So that's why I've just set up this secondary filter, if you like. It's not to filter the water anymore, it's to stop anything accessing the metal mug, the container, once it's been filtered. And now we sit back and wait. You can't be in a rush for a brew when you're using a brown bag, in my experience. All in good time. I'm going to attempt first of all to drop a spark onto the charwood that I made in August's all day video. I know that I can drop a spark onto charcloth. I know that I can usually drop a spark onto charcloth, but let me try it today onto charwood using a piece of flint and my relatively new striker. So let's see how that goes. Lots of sparks coming off. Can you make that out? I think you can. So no problems getting the sparks at all. Just got to get one of the buggers to land. If I can do this, this will just disintegrate the charwood. See what I'm thinking here. Yeah, tons. Yeah, it's disintegrating the charwood. Should probably leave the charwood where it is and try and drop a spark onto that. What I do know with these sparks from a steel striker, a flint and steel, is that they're cooler than the sparks from a ferro rod. So the material, or the materials that you can use, seem to be fewer. You don't have such a wide range. I guess the tolerance for the temperature of the spark. See, there's loads. I can see. I appreciate that you perhaps can't, but I can see lots of sparks landing on it, but none are actually taking. And yet I know that if I was to drop a spark on from my ferro rod, it would be fine. No, lots landing, there's just no impact. So I think I'm going to put that to rest for today, dig out some charcloth and then give the charcloth a go. I'm fairly confident, he says, that will work. So let's get rid of the charcloth, put that to bed for another day. Take two then. I've ditched the charwood, I've got some charcloth there on top of the flint. There's my striker. This is quite frustrating in some respects. After, if you've used a ferro rod, I mean, crikey, you can just, have a ferro rod in the same room as a piece of charcloth and you've got an ember, but clearly, there we go. You can see that it's caught the spark, so let's quickly transfer that into the bird's nest, where I actually have another piece of charcloth sat waiting for it to help extend that ember. Go, some flames, invert that. Put it on the hearth, get my rather terrible feather sticks onto there. Talk about those at the end of the video. Probably got 3/4 of a mug of filtered water now,
but as I said earlier on, yes, it's coarse filtered, but it's by no means safe to drink yet. So what I'm going to do is take this over there, bring it up to a boil. Once it hits a rolling boil, leave it 2 minutes, then it'll be safe to drink. So this has been rolling boiling for way more than 2 minutes, I can assure you. I actually got distracted doing something else somewhere else, so I've lost quite a bit of fluid from there, from evaporation or from steam. Let's just move that off there. Now if you have a look in there, it looks dirty, doesn't it? It looks, I mean, there is some residue in the bottom from the smoke, from the ash, but the water looks dirty. It's actually just the peat, the colouring in the soil that's done that, as opposed to it actually being dirty. It's just the colouring out of the soil, if it's peat or whatever the main soil type is in these areas, just leaching out into the water. So the water isn't actually dirty, it's just got that colouring to it. Right, I'm going to have myself the world's smallest, most longest to boil and make hot chocolate, and then I'm going to get back to wrapping this video up.
There we have it, folks. The end of another video and the end of the September Bushcraft All Dayer. It was a good day, enjoyed it, enjoyed making that freestanding lashing free cooking tripod and the pot hanger using the honeysuckle. Some work's going to be needed, I think, or at least maybe not work, but just an adjustment of expectations, I think, when using the steel striker with flint, that the sparks are just not as hot as using a ferro rod. Therefore I need to be a little more patient and a little bit more careful in considering the tinder that I use to catch that spark, because that took a few attempts, certainly more attempts than it would have taken with a ferro rod, most certainly. The brown bag situation just continues, still took forever to get it filtered. It really took a long time. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, I didn't help myself. What I should have done is I should have got the water at the very beginning of the day and allowed it to filter whilst I was tinkering around with the tripod and the pot hanger and the feather sticks and splitting the firewood and That's what I should have done. Instead, I actually waited until the tripod was built so that I could hang the brown bag off it. Why? There's plenty of woods in the trees for me to hang brown bags from. I didn't need to wait for the tripod. It would have still taken as long to filter through, but I wouldn't have been clock watching as much to get my brew down my neck. And then we move on to my feather sticks. Was not happy with my feather sticks at all. I don't know why, because I can do feather sticks. I'm linking to a video now in the top right hand corner of the screen. I can make good feather sticks. I just always seem to have a problem with pine. Maybe that's just one of the properties of using pine for feather sticks. Maybe they don't make good feather sticks. I don't know. You tell me. Have you had good success with feather sticks using pine? And when I mean good feather sticks, I'm not necessarily talking about the things that you see on YouTube. I call them drunk driver feather sticks, because they look like a drunk driver's hit a tree at about 80 miles an hour. They're just splinters of wood. They're not good, long, thin curls with nice thin necks. They're just frayed wood at the end. That's what I mean by a good feather stick. That's why I'm beating myself up about it. So what I'm going to do about that is I'm going to get home, I'm going to find myself some nice straight pieces of sycamore, dead standing, and go to town again and see, is it the technique that I've lost, or is it perhaps the wood and the type of wood that I need to become more familiar with? All in all though, a good day. Sounds like I'm on a bit of a downer at the end of it. Not at all. It was a good day, as is every day out in the woods doing these sorts of things. Hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to see more, then do click on the subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner of your screen. If you think there's anybody in your network that would benefit from watching this, then do please feel free to share it with them. And if you've got any comments or observations about the video, anything you saw me doing where you thought oh yeah, I wouldn't mind giving that a try, or oh, you did that wrong, Craig, you should have tried it this way, or try it this way in the future, then do please feel free to share your thoughts, comments, observations, ideas, nitpicking, whatever you want to call it, in the comments below. Thanks as always for watching, guys and gals, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.